Maya walked through the dense forest of Verdantis Prime with her heart beating fast. She was an elf woman with silver hair that shone like moonlight and bright green eyes that could see in the darkest places. Most of the other elves in the crystalline cities thought she was strange because she loved the wild forest more than the safety of their homes. But Maya did not care what others thought. She believed in something that no one else believed in. She believed that dragons were real. For many years, the other elves told her that dragons were just old stories from ancient times. They said dragons were myths and nothing more. But Maya read the old books in the hidden library of her city. She found pictures and descriptions of dragons that seemed too detailed to be made up. The old elves who wrote those books had seen dragons with their own eyes. Maya was sure of this. She made a promise to herself that one day she would find these magnificent creatures and prove that everyone else was wrong. On this particular morning, the sun was just starting to come up over the tall trees. The light was golden and warm. Maya had packed some food and water and a rope in her bag. She wore simple clothes that made it easy to move and climb. She had decided that today was the day she would go deeper into the forbidden forest than any other elf had gone in hundreds of years. She was nervous, but she was also excited. As she walked deeper and deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller and older. Some of them were so big that 10 elves holding hands could not reach around them. The air smelled like rich earth and green growing things. Strange birds sang songs that she had never heard before. Maya could feel something in the air, something old and powerful. It made the tiny hairs on her arms stand up. She knew she was getting close to something important. Then she heard a sound that made her stop walking. It was like thunder, but not quite. It was musical and alive, like a song being sung by something huge and alive. Maya's heart began to pound even faster. She started to climb up a steep hill, moving as fast as she could without making too much noise. Her hands grabbed onto roots and rocks to help pull her up. When she reached the top of the hill, she looked down into a wide valley below. What she saw made her forget how to breathe. 3 enormous dragons were coming down from the sky like falling stars. They were so big that she could not believe they were real. The biggest one was dark purple with spots of silver that glowed in the morning light. The second one was emerald green with streaks of gold running through its scales. The third one was pure white, whiter than snow, and its eyes shone like the brightest stars in the night sky. Their wings were so large that they looked like they could hold up the entire world. Maya stood very still. Every story she had ever read said that dragons were dangerous. They said that dragons would burn you with their fire and crush you with their claws. She wanted to run, but her legs would not move. She wanted to hide, but there was nowhere to go. So she just stood there and watched the dragons land in the valley. The white dragon landed first. It walked in circles on the ground, its tail swishing back and forth. Then it looked up the hill and saw Maya. Maya could see one of its huge golden eyes looking right at her. For a long moment, nothing happened. The dragon did not attack. It did not fly away. It just looked at her with an expression in its eye that seemed kind, not mean. Very slowly, Maya raised her hands above her head. She wanted to show the dragon that she had no weapons and that she meant no harm. The white dragon watched her. Then, to Maya's surprise, the dragon began to walk toward her. Its massive claws left deep marks in the ground with each step. When the dragon reached the bottom of the hill, it folded its wings against its back and began to climb up toward her. Maya could have run away. She could have turned and run back into the forest. But something told her to stay still. Something told her that this moment was important, that this was what she had been searching for her whole life. When the white dragon reached her, it was so close that she could feel the heat coming from its body. The dragon lowered its huge head down until its face was level with hers. Maya reached out one trembling hand and touched the dragon's scales. The moment her skin made contact with the smooth, warm scales, everything changed. Pictures and words and feelings flooded into her mind all at once. She saw things that she had never seen before. She saw the dragons flying through space. She saw them fighting something huge and ugly and horrible. She saw cities burning and worlds dying. She saw the dragons coming to Verdantis Prime and hiding in the forests, waiting and waiting for someone to find them. The white dragon sent a thought into Maya's mind. It was not words exactly, but more like feelings and pictures that she could understand. The dragon was telling her its name, Luminara. That was the dragon's name, and somehow Maya knew that this name was correct. The other 2 dragons came over to where Maya was standing. The purple one made a sound in her mind too. Its name was Sarith. The green dragon was called Kalith. All 3 dragons were looking at Maya with their intelligent eyes. They were waiting for something. They were waiting for her to understand. And slowly, as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, Maya began to understand what the dragons wanted from her. They needed help. They needed someone brave enough to believe in them. They needed her. Maya knew that her life would never be the same after this day. She had come to the forest looking for dragons, and she had found them. But she had also found something else. She had found her purpose. She had found 3 friends who needed her more than anything in the world. She put her hands on Luminara's neck and made a decision that would change the fate of her entire civilization. Over the next few days, Maya returned to the forest again and again. She told no one where she was going. Her family and friends in the crystalline city were confused by her strange behavior. She would disappear in the morning and not return until evening. She would not explain where she had been or what she was doing. If they had known the truth, they would have thought she was losing her mind. But every time Maya returned to the hidden valley where she had first met the dragons, she knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Luminara would be waiting for her at the top of the hill. Sometimes Sareth and Kelith would be there too, but often Luminara came alone. Maya realized that the white dragon had chosen her as a special friend, just as she had chosen the dragon. On the 4th day, Maya brought rope and supplies. Luminara stood very still while Maya climbed onto her back. The dragon's scales were smooth and warm under her hands. She could feel the dragon's strong muscles moving beneath her as Luminara walked. Then very slowly the dragon began to run. Maya held on tight to the ridges on Luminara's back. Suddenly they were moving faster than Maya had ever moved in her life. Faster and faster. Then Luminara jumped into the air and they were flying. Flying on the back of a dragon was nothing like Maya had imagined. It was better and more wonderful than anything she had ever experienced. The wind rushed past her face. The earth far below grew smaller and smaller. She could see the entire forest spreading out like a green ocean in every direction. She could see the crystalline city in the distance where her people lived. Everything looked different from up here, smaller and less important somehow. Luminara flew in circles in the sky, climbing higher and higher. The air grew cold. Maya could see the curve of the planet below her. She could see the stars still visible even though the sun was shining. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. All the fear and worry she had carried with her seemed to fall away. Up here in the sky with Luminara, nothing could touch her. Nothing could hurt her. As they flew, Luminara sent pictures into Maya's mind. The dragon was trying to teach her things. Maya saw images of great battles from long ago. She saw elves and dragons fighting together against enemies from across the stars. She saw cities being built with ancient technology. She saw the first dragons coming to Verdantis Prime and hiding from enemies that were chasing them. She understood that this planet had been chosen as a hiding place, a safe home where the dragons could rest and recover from their long war. But the safety would not last. Luminara showed Maya a terrible truth. The enemies were coming again. They were called the Xylon, and they were traders and fighters who traveled from world to world. They took what they wanted and destroyed everything else. They had already conquered many civilizations. Verdantis Prime was on their list. The Xylon knew about the ancient technology hidden here. They wanted it for their own purposes. When the Xylon arrived, they would destroy the elves and take everything of value. This was why the dragons had revealed themselves to Maya. This was why they needed her help so badly. Without an ally from among the elves, the dragons could not save the world. The elves had to be warned. The elves had to prepare for the coming invasion. The elves and dragons had to work together if they wanted to survive. When Luminara landed back at the valley, Maya climbed down from the dragon's back with her mind spinning. She had so much information, so much knowledge swirling around inside her head. She did not know where to start or what to do first. But she knew one thing for certain. She had to go back to the crystalline city. She had to tell the elders what she had learned, even if they did not believe her. That night, Maya snuck into the high council chambers where the oldest and wisest elves met. She stood in front of them and told them everything. She told them about the dragons. She told them about the Xylon. She told them about the terrible danger that was coming. The elders listened to her words, and she could see doubt written all over their faces. They thought she was confused or making up wild stories. Some of them laughed. Others just shook their heads sadly. One old elf named Martin spoke to her with a kind voice. He said that he understood she believed what she was saying, but that dragons were not real and the Xylon were just stories from old times. He told her to stop going into the forest and to focus on her duties to the city. He told her that if she did not stop talking about dragons and invasions, they would think she needed to rest and heal in a special place reserved for elves whose minds had become confused. Maya left the council chambers feeling angry and desperate. The elders would not help her. They would not listen to her. She would have to find another way. She would have to convince people one at a time that the danger was real. There had to be others who were brave enough to believe her, others who would be willing to stand with her and the dragons. The next morning, Maya made a list of the people in the crystalline city who might believe her story. She needed people who were brave and open-minded. She needed people who were not afraid to question what the elders told them to believe. She needed warriors who could fight and thinkers who could solve problems. The first person on her list was a young warrior named Victoria. Victoria was known for her strength and her skill with weapons. She had always seemed different from the other warriors, like she was not satisfied with just guarding the city. Maybe, Maya thought, she would be interested in something bigger and more important. Maya waited until Victoria was walking through the gardens alone. Then she approached her and told her everything. Victoria listened to Maya's story with great interest. She asked many questions and Maya answered all of them honestly. When Maya finished, Victoria looked at her seriously and said only one word. She said, "Come." Together they went to the forest. When Victoria saw the dragons with her own eyes, she fell to her knees. She had never believed in magic or anything that could not be explained by science, but she could not deny what she was seeing. The dragons were real. Everything Maya had told her was true. The second person Maya recruited was a scholar named Grace. Grace had spent her whole life studying the ancient technology that powered the crystalline city. She had always wanted to understand how it worked and where it had come from. When Maya told her about the old technology hidden beneath the forest, about the weapon systems and computers that had been built thousands of years ago, Grace's eyes lit up with excitement and wonder. She agreed to help immediately. The third ally was a strong man named Samuel who worked in the gardens. He had always felt trapped by city life and dreamed of adventure. He jumped at the chance to see the dragons and to be part of something that mattered. He brought 2 of his friends with him, and they too became believers. Within 2 weeks, Maya had gathered a small group of allies. There were 15 elves in total, not a lot compared to the thousands who lived in the city, but it was a beginning. They met secretly in the forest with Luminara, Sareth, and Kelith. The dragons helped teach them about the coming invasion. They helped them understand the danger and the importance of what they were trying to do. Grace was able to navigate the ancient computers hidden beneath the forest. She found maps and information about the old weapon systems. She learned that there were powerful defense systems built into the planet itself, technology that could be used to protect Verdantis Prime from invasion. But the systems needed to be reactivated and controlled by elves who understood them. Victoria and Samuel began training the other warriors in new fighting techniques. Luminara showed them how dragons attacked and how they could use this knowledge to fight effectively alongside the creatures. The dragons taught them strategy and tactics that had been used in battles thousands of years ago. Maya's role was to be the bridge between the 2 species. Her connection with Luminara was the strongest, and it grew stronger every day. She could feel the dragon's emotions and thoughts. She could send her own thoughts and feelings back to Luminara in return. Together they began to plan for the coming of the Xylon. They gathered supplies. They made weapons. They created plans for battle. But there was still one thing they needed. They needed more people. 15 warriors and 1 scholar would not be enough to defend an entire planet. They needed to convince more of the elves to believe in the dragons and to prepare for the invasion. This was the hard part. This was the challenge that seemed impossible. One night Maya had an idea. She decided to invite more elves to the forest, but not to tell them why. She simply asked people she trusted to come on a journey with her. She promised that they would see something amazing. She promised that it would change their lives forever. Some people refused, but others said yes. They came to the forest, and when they saw the dragons, most of them believed immediately. By the 3rd week, Maya had convinced 50 elves to join her cause. By the 4th week, there were 100, but time was running out. The dragons could feel the Xylon ships approaching from across space. They could sense their coming the way a person can sense a storm approaching on the horizon. The invasion would arrive soon, maybe in days, maybe in weeks. Maya and her growing army of believers had to be ready. They had to prepare the ancient weapons. They had to train hard. They had to believe that they could win even though the odds seemed impossible. Deep beneath the forest floor, there was a place that no elf had visited for thousands of years. Grace led Maya, Victoria, Samuel, and a team of their best warriors down into the earth through tunnels that were hidden and forgotten. The tunnels were carved out of stone and metal. Strange symbols covered the walls, symbols that were so old that they seemed to belong to another world entirely. As they walked, the tunnels began to glow with a soft blue light. Grace explained that the light was coming from the ancient technology. It was waking up because of their presence. It could sense that elves were here again after so many years of emptiness. They reached a massive chamber deep underground. The chamber was enormous, so big that Maya could not see the far end even with her excellent elf vision. The walls were covered with machines and computers and devices that had no names. Lights blinked and hummed. The air felt alive with energy and power. In the center of the chamber was a large stone platform. Grace climbed onto the platform and placed her hands on a smooth metal surface. Immediately, the entire chamber came to life. The machines began to hum louder. The lights grew brighter. Ancient screens flickered on, showing images and information in a language that was almost but not quite understandable to the elves. Grace's eyes widened with wonder and amazement. She could read some of the language. Her years of studying ancient texts had taught her enough to understand basic commands and information. She worked the controls, and slowly, one by one, the old defense systems began to awaken. Weapon systems came online. Shield generators started to function. Communication devices that could reach across the stars began to transmit signals to other elf colonies on other worlds. Victoria and the warriors explored the chamber and found vast stores of weapons and armor. There were energy rifles that could shoot beams of pure power. There were shields that could deflect almost anything. There were vehicles that could move on land or in the air. All of it had been preserved and protected by the ancient technology for thousands of years. More importantly, they found records. The records told the story of the elves and their journey to Verdantis Prime. They told of the great wars that had been fought between the dragons and the Xylon in ancient times. They told of how the elves and dragons had worked together to defeat the Xylon invasions. The knowledge in these records would help them prepare for the coming battle. As the days passed, more and more of the elf population began to understand the truth and accept the reality of the danger. Maya and her allies used the ancient records to convince people. They showed the warriors how to use the ancient weapons. They demonstrated that the defense systems were really working. They proved beyond any doubt that the dragons were real and that the Xylon invasion was coming. Even some of the elders began to believe. An old elf named Martha, who was the leader of the council, came to the forest and saw Luminara and the other dragons herself. She stood in front of the magnificent creatures and understood that everything Maya had said was true. Martha gathered all the important elves and told them to prepare for battle. She declared that Verdantis Prime would defend itself against the Xylon. She announced that the dragons were not enemies but allies, and that every elf would honor them and fight alongside them. The entire civilization began to mobilize. Elves who had spent their whole lives in quiet cities picked up weapons and learned to fight. Scientists and scholars worked with Grace to understand and improve the ancient technology. Warriors trained day and night with Victoria and Samuel and the other experienced fighters. Young elves dreamed of becoming dragon riders. Everyone in the city had a role to play in the coming defense. The dragons were pleased. Luminara spent every moment with Maya, teaching her the most advanced combat techniques. Sareth and Keyleth worked with the other warriors, showing them how to fight alongside dragons in battle. The connection between the elves and the dragons grew stronger every day. Then one morning, as Maya stood on the highest point of the crystalline city and looked up at the sky, she saw them. Tiny points of light began to appear in the darkness above the planet. Ships. Xylon ships. They had arrived. The invasion had begun. There was no more time to prepare. The time to fight had come at last. Maya called out a signal that spread through the entire city. Warriors grabbed their weapons. Dragons spread their wings. The battle that would determine the fate of two civilizations was about to begin. The sky above Verdantis Prime turned black with Xylon ships. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They were ugly and twisted looking. Nothing like the beautiful ships the elves had seen in ancient records. The Xylon ships began to descend toward the planet, sending powerful beams of destructive energy down toward the cities below. The ancient defense systems that Grace had reactivated started to fire back. Energy beams shot into the sky, destroying Xylon ships in great explosions of light and fire. The Xylon ships exploded one after another, but there were so many of them that new ones kept coming. For every Xylon ship that was destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Then the dragons took flight. Luminara led Sareth and Calith into the sky, their mighty wings carrying them higher and higher toward the invading fleet. Behind them came more dragons, dozens more that had emerged from hidden places in the forest. These were old dragons, ancient and powerful, who had been sleeping for thousands of years but had woken to defend their home. Maya rode on Luminara's back as the dragon flew toward the Xylon fleet. The wind rushed past her face. Her hands gripped the ridges on Luminara's neck. She could feel the dragon's excitement and determination flowing through their mental connection. The dragon was ready for this battle. It had been preparing for this moment for thousands of years. Luminara and the other dragons attacked the Xylon ships with a power and beauty that was almost too magnificent to watch. The dragons breathed fire that burned like the sun itself. They struck at the ships with their claws and their tails. They dodged the energy beams that the Xylon sent at them. The elves on the ground below watched in amazement as their allies turned the tide of the battle. The warriors on the ground also fought bravely. Victoria led her troops forward with great courage. Samuel and the other warriors used the ancient weapons to destroy Xylon soldiers who tried to land on the planet. The elves fired their energy rifles with precision and skill. They used the shields and armor to protect themselves from the Xylon attacks. Maya found herself doing things she did not know she could do. She discovered that her connection with Luminara was so strong that she could use her mind to control multiple dragons at once. She could coordinate their attacks. She could direct them toward the most dangerous Xylon ships. She became like a general in the sky, directing the dragons and the elf warriors below in a dance of battle that was terrible and beautiful at the same time. For hours the battle raged. The sky was filled with fire and explosions and the sounds of dragons roaring and ships crashing. The ground shook from the impact of falling debris, but slowly, surely, the Xylon invasion began to fail. More and more of their ships were destroyed. Fewer and fewer Xylon soldiers were landing on the planet. Then, finally, the Xylon fleet began to retreat. The remaining ships turned and started to fly away from Verdantis Prime. They had come to conquer the planet and take its technology, but they had not expected to face dragons and an allied civilization. They had not expected the elves and dragons to fight with such courage and skill. The invasion had failed. As the last Xylon ship disappeared into the darkness of space, the dragons returned to the planet. They landed in the valleys and the forests and the cities. The elves ran out to greet them, cheering and celebrating their victory. Maya climbed down from Luminara's back and put her arms around the dragon's neck. She was crying, but these were happy tears, tears of relief and joy. In the days after the battle, everything changed. The elves and dragons were no longer hiding from each other. They were no longer living in separate worlds. They came together to build a new civilization, a civilization where elves and dragons worked as partners and friends. New laws were made that protected the dragons and gave them rights equal to those of the elves. Young elves began training as dragon riders, learning the skills that Maya had learned from Luminara. Grace continued to study the ancient technology and discovered even more amazing machines and devices. She found ways to heal the sick and to feed the poor. She found ways to create power that did not harm the environment. The ancient technology, once feared and forgotten, became a tool to build a better future. Victoria became the commander of the new combined forces of elves and dragons. She trained warriors and dragon riders in new techniques that combined the strength of both species. She worked with Sareth to create strategies for protecting the planet from any future invasions. Maya and Luminara became symbols of the new unity and cooperation between elves and dragons. They traveled to other elf colonies on other worlds and taught them about what had happened on Verdantis Prime. Slowly, other planets and other civilizations began to see that peace between different species was possible. They began to welcome dragons into their societies and to prepare defenses against the Xylon threat. Years passed, and Verdantis Prime became a place of wonder and beauty. The crystalline cities grew and changed, incorporating the natural beauty of the forests and the wild spaces where the dragons lived. The planet became a center of learning and technology. Elves and dragons created art and music and buildings that were more beautiful than anything that had ever been created before. Maya grew older, but her bond with Luminara never weakened. They continued to fly together through the skies of Verdantis Prime. They continued to work together to keep their civilization safe and peaceful, and whenever young elves asked her how she had found the dragons and convinced everyone to believe in them, Maya would smile and tell them the truth. She would tell them that sometimes the most important things are the ones that other people do not believe in, and that sometimes one person with courage and faith can change the entire world. The dragons continued to live free in the forests of Verdantis Prime, no longer hiding and no longer alone. They had found allies and friends. They had found people who believed in them and fought alongside them. And they had discovered that the universe, vast and dangerous as it was, could also be a place of hope and light and endless possibility.